You'll understand why in a minute. I haven't scripted this video. I didn't prepare for it. I'm doing it in the moment, but I just feel, I feel compelled to do it for a reason. Two of the most popular videos on my YouTube channel have to do with pet loss. One is grieving the loss of a pet, and the other is called Your Pet's Death is Not Your Fault. And I have gotten so many comments on those videos, over the last couple of years, and I reply to every single comment. And I'm telling you that every single time I have tears on my cheeks, every time, because I've lost pets. I've lost several pets. I know how it feels. And some of the stories people tell me, some of the things, it's just like really upsetting, okay? And this just happened. I just this moment replied to a comment, and I kind of hope this person is watching this video. Someone commented and said that they were feeling like their pet's death was their fault because they euthanized the pet. And for dementia. The pet had dementia, and she said, did I do this too soon? Should I have not have done this? So I gave her a thoughtful reply. Oh, I got to get my act together here. Anyway, a couple of things I want to talk about, because I've never really hit on euthanization, but yet it's such a big deal for pet owners. And like I said to this viewer who made this comment, I said, it's one of the biggest responsibilities for pet owners, but it's also the most heartbreaking. But our pets count on us to make the best decisions for them. From the time they're a puppy and you don't want them to swallow anything they could choke on, all the way to the end of their life when you're deciding whether that dog should be euthanized. Do you know what I mean? It's hard. But you have to realize that when it comes to euthanization, your pet is counting on you to make the decision that they can't make for themselves. Now, I'm not pushing euthanization. I'm just saying I understand what it's like to stand in those shoes and to try to make the decision. All right, I wrote a couple notes here because there's a couple things I want to tell you, and I'm hoping that this will make a difference for people. Not only if you've lost a pet and had to euthanize, or just keep it under your hat for the future, okay? First of all, my last two dogs, one was a Boston Terrier named Cagney, and the other was a wiener dog named Taz. If you've watched any of my videos, you've probably seen pictures of them and heard all about them. They're all over my website as well. Both those dogs I let go too far. I let them suffer too long. I should have euthanized them earlier. And so we can have enormous regret because we think we did it too soon. Well, I'm here to tell you, you can have enormous regret if you didn't do it soon enough. All right, now a more severe situation was with Taz. Both these dogs ultimately died of congestive heart failure. But little Taz, that little wiener dog, she suffered and suffered and suffered. And the biggest, in my defense on that, I took her to several vets and she went undiagnosed. Nobody diagnosed her with congestive heart failure. Pisses me off because in hindsight, the symptoms were quite clear and she could have had medication that would have, lessened that suffering a great deal. But that's for a different video. But she was suffering, and the reason I didn't want to put her down, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if she could be treated. I didn't know if she could be helped. And that's why I let it go on and on. But, thinking back, as a pet owner, if I had to do it over again, I would have put Taz down sooner. I would have. All right. Now, and also Cagney, the Boston Terrier, he died from congestive heart failure, and his last days weren't as severe. As a matter of fact, he was pretty darn good right up until just a handful of days. before he died. Like, he could still play, he could do all these things, but when it came to the congestive heart failure, he couldn't breathe, couldn't breathe, couldn't breathe. And when I think back to that, I think there was probably a whole lot more bad going on for that dog than there was good. You know, you struggle to breathe, you struggle to breathe, you struggle to breathe all day long, all night long. So what if you can play with a bone for 5 minutes? And I judged his quality of life on that. Do you know what I mean? And I do realize that hindsight is 2020, and I do say in my video that I did about your pet's death is not your fault. I do believe that I did everything that I could. I did everything I knew how to do. I wish I would have gotten a Kleenex. I got one here. And I made the best decision that I could based on what I knew at the time, based on what I was experiencing at the time. But I do think that those two dogs, especially Taz, I should have arranged for euthanization earlier than I did. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Another thing I want to tell you about is another wiener dog that I had before those two dogs, named Maggie. I had her for several years, and I loved her just so profoundly. She was a beautiful girl. She was the sweetest little dog. But actually I think she was a mix between a dachshund and a chihuahua, because she clearly had a dachshund body, but she had more like a chihuahua face. She didn't have the long pointy nose, and my guess would be that she was a mix of chihuahua and dachshund, but either way she was adorable. But she was mostly like, she looked like a wiener dog, okay? Well, I had her for several years, and I don't know how old she was because I rescued her. That's another long story. But toward the end of her life, me and my first husband got a divorce. All right. And I moved to an apartment. We sold our house. I moved to an apartment and took her with me. And he didn't get her. I got her, which, he didn't fight me on it. She belonged with me. But the move was very hard for her. She was already suffering, she was already struggling, and she was struggling with incontinence, and I was literally diapering the dog at that time, okay? And I moved with her, and she had a terrible, terrible time, with the move. She had a really hard time. I'm sure she missed my ex-husband, couldn't understand where he was. I mean, I'm sure it was a very difficult time for her, and it was a very difficult time for me. If I would have had my way, I wouldn't have left her. I wouldn't have left her alone at all. But I had to go to work. But I will always be grateful to her veterinarian, who I had just met because I had moved to a new town. This was her new veterinarian, and I had taken her before, and then I was making a trip to Florida to visit my mother, which I did every year, and um, we always had friends and stuff that would babysit Maggie. Did I mention her name was Maggie? This wiener dog's name was Maggie. We always had friends and stuff that would babysit Maggie when we went to Florida. Well, now I'm by myself, and those people are kind of out of the picture because they were the husband's friends. So I'm looking at having to board her to go to Florida. And of course, I'm feeling guilty about going to Florida, but I could tell you my mother died a handful of years later, so I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did go. But I was concerned about boarding her, and so I talked to a couple of boarding places and stuff, and this one guy that I talked to he had a nice boarding place, and he was well known in the community, and I had a nice conversation with him, and I said, look, I need to board my dog, but I said, I've got to have somebody I can count on. She has medication she has to take every day. She's incontinent. She literally has diapers. And he was very kind, and he said, I can assure you, Deborah, I will take care of your dog. I am absolutely willing to do that. But thankfully for Maggie, he didn't leave it at that. He said, I got to tell you, Deborah, that this dog is probably going to suffer with your absence. And I really think that you need to give serious thought to whether this dog can handle being boarded at this point. And I think you need to consider this dog's overall quality of life. I think you need to give this some thought. So I hung up with him, and I took Maggie to the vet. I don't remember if it was because of anything in particular. But anyway, I took her to the vet. And, the vet was talking to me or whatever. And he said, I'm going to say something gross, so I'm going to warn you. But I think it's necessary to say it because I think sometimes we need to share as pet owners the horror of this shit. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Um, Don't worry, it's not scary. It's just gross. Anyway, he's talking about the incontinence, and I'm talking about the fact that I'm diapering her, and I'm talking about how I'm using baby wipes and stuff. And he was saying that, being a dog being incontinent for a long period of time is not good because they can get infections. She can get urinary tract infection. You can't keep the fanny and, clean, kind of no matter what you do. There could be bacteria growing. And he said he had even seen maggots. That's the gross part. I almost died. I thought, oh my God. It didn't dawn on me that such a thing could happen, so I was horrified by that, and he could see that. I said, geez, I never thought of that. And so I was asking him, what do you think about boarding her? Maybe I shouldn't go to Florida, like whatever. And I'm really sorry for the snot. The guy said to me, and I'll always be grateful, he said, I gotta be straight with you, Deborah. He said, I think you need to put this dog down. I think you need to put the dog down. And I said, no. I said, she still plays. She's still excited when I come home. She's still eating. She's still like, no. And he was very adamant. And he said, he said, the dog's not necessarily going to die peacefully in her bed in her sleep. He said, she's having some serious issues. I'm sorry, I got to reach for a Kleenex. I just knocked a bunch of stuff over on the coffee table. He said, she's having some serious issues. She said, Deborah, she could have a heart attack while you're gone. She could have kidney failure while you're gone when you're at work. It's not necessarily going to be this peaceful death where this dog is going to come to the end of her life and, pass away peacefully in her bed. He said, something could happen and you can prevent this. And he said, look at her quality of life. This is what's happening. This is, so I'm grateful to him because he was right. He was right. She was really suffering. And, I had the guilt of the divorce. I had the guilt of moving. I had the guilt of I'm going to Florida, whatever. And so I decided to euthanize Maggie. And I had a lot of guilt because I'm like, are people going to think I put the dog down because I want to go to Florida? Do you know what I mean? That wasn't it. It was the trip to Florida, considering that and considering boarding her, that brought the issue home for me to talk with that boarding guy who was honest with me and said, listen, Deb, I think you need to think about this dog's situation. And then for the veterinarian to really drive it home and say, something's going to happen with this dog. You're not doing her any favors. She's suffering. And he said straight out, I think you need to euthanize the dog, and I did. But it wasn't because of the trip to Florida. It was the upcoming trip to Florida that brought up the whole issue that, what about Maggie? What am I going to do? So I did it. I made the appointment. I did it. And, I gotta say that at that time, one of the biggest things that I struggled with when I was grieving the loss of her was the euthanization. And I'm sorry to say that this way, because I made an appointment for her execution. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's how I saw it. I arranged for this. I arranged for her death. And I struggled with it so much that I had made that appointment, but this was years ago. This was more than 25 years ago. And since then, I've come to terms with it, and I do absolutely know that I did the right thing. Maybe I should have put her down sooner and not put her through that divorce and the move to begin with. Maybe, I don't know. But I know at the time that I did euthanize her, I know that it was the right thing to do. But we feel guilty. We feel guilty. It's like, I just thought, but But like I said, I made the appointment and I couldn't deal with it. But that's what I mean when I say it was my responsibility. It was my responsibility as Maggie's owner to have those conversations with the professionals who could give me good, intelligent guidance, and to have the courage and the compassion to make the decision for her. At the time I was so guilty about it. I was so sad about it. I was horrified by it. I was. But now, all these years later, I look back and I realize, number one, it was the right thing. And number two, it was my responsibility. It was my responsibility to make a decision for her well-being. And that was the decision that needed to be made. Do you know what I mean? So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sorry for this crying video. I didn't plan on doing it, but to hear this girl comment, I'm assuming it was a girl. I'm sorry if you weren't a girl. To hear her commenting about the guilt, she had to euthanize. And I started crying when I was responding to her, and I thought, damn it, we suffer with it so much, don't we? Don't we? So I'm going to leave it at that. I'll give you some links in the description box I'll just give you one link for my playlist for pet loss. I have a playlist because a lot of my subscribers came to my channel because of that issue, and it's another reason I decided to do this video today, because if you're watching this video, if you're one of my subscribers, you might have found me because of this. This kind of sadly, that's where most of my subscribers came from, was people who have lost their pets and landed on my videos. But I do have the video, Your Pet's Death is Not Your Fault, where we talk about this. I have a video about grieving the loss of your pet. I have some other videos about pet loss that I hope will help you. So I hope I helped today. I hope I didn't hurt you. I hope I didn't make anything worse for you. I just wanted to talk about this with my subscribers and say, you know what? I get it. I understand it. I have lived it. But I've also come through a lot, and I have learned so much that I wish I would have known at the time these things happened, even how to cope with the grief, So I'm using my YouTube channel to share everything that I've learned about coping with pet loss and all these things, because it's just stuff I wish I would have known. Like when I euthanized Maggie, I wish somebody would have said to me, Deborah, it was your responsibility. Maggie needed you to do that. You do know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just wish that I just wish I knew. I wish I knew better. I wish I understood better. I wish I would have been kinder to myself in it. I'll leave you with one thought, and whether or not you agree with me is completely up to you. I do believe in the afterlife. I do believe that animals go to heaven. I absolutely believe that they exist in spirit after their passing. I talk about that in some of my videos. I went to it. Well, I'm not going to tell the whole story. Watch my videos. I'll tell you some stories about animals in the afterlife. I do believe in all of that. So I do believe that my pets are around me, especially, after their passing. I think that they were around me. I do. So, I'll just leave you with that. When you lose a pet, I do feel that they continue to live in spirit, and I do feel that they are around you, that they're spending time with you, that they're around you, and they are no longer suffering from whatever took their life. They're not suffering from that anymore, and they don't want you to suffer either. So I'll leave you with that. So feel free to comment if you want to. I would like this to be a discussion, and I would like this to be a place where people can help each other with this, okay? Okay. I hope I've helped. Bye-bye.